Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, colleagues from around the world. Welcome to the second session of the second stage of the Air Quality Community of Practice. I am Christine Muthee, the Air Quality Analyst at WRI Africa. And on behalf of WRI Mexico and Africa, I want to welcome you all to this interaction of our cities of the Global South. In this session, we'll address the topic operationalizing air quality forecast in the cities concept. And our goal today is to have a shared understanding of the challenges of operationalizing a forecast system in cities of the Global South, with a focus on Latin American cities and the cities in Africa. In this session, we have one keynote speaker, one round of discussion among experts of our cities, and two interventions from our comments and questions. And the first presentation is in charge of the NASA research scientist, who will work with us about the overview of the GeoCF forecast, with a focus on downscaling the general forecast with partner cities in the CanAIRy Alert project. And in the round of discussion, we have experts working within cities and subnational government who will discuss their experiences in operationalizing air quality forecast and even potential use of this forecast within these cities. This section will include Nuevo Leon, Mexico City, Bogota, Kampala, and Nairobi, as well as a project manager in charge of the development and maintenance of a regional scale modeling tool. So without further ado, we are going to go to Emma Knowland, who is the lead scientist of the development of the NASA GMAO atmospheric composition forecasting system. That is what we call the GeoCF. And in the first stage of this community, the GMAO team, through Christoph Keller, talked to us about the fundamentals and the workings of the GeoCF forecasting system. But now Emma will emphasize on operationalizing it and using it in the global forecasting within cities context, and further work that NASA is doing both with Latin America and African cities represented herein.
So the outline for my talk today is an overview of the GEOS model capabilities, specifically on the GEOS composition forecast system. I'll walk through several ways to access the model forecasts, as well as give examples on how we can bias correct our global forecasts for air quality decision making. So I'd like to start with, why is NASA doing this? Most of us think of NASA working off in outer space, but we also have a large Earth Science division. And our office has a core mission to enhance the value of NASA's observations in order to understand, analyze, and predict changes in physics, chemistry, and biology of the Earth system. And so we do this by developing and maintaining an Earth system model called GEOS, which stands for Goddard Earth Observing System. So as the name says, it's mainly designed to advance the use of satellite data products. So we get global coverage from space of many different constituents, as I'm showing here, like ozone, but the temporal frequency for global coverage can be on the order of days, not hours, depending on the instrument. And so our office, GMAO, specializes in data assimilation, which is a process which combines and propagates information from observations both in space and time, using governing equations and error estimates within a model framework. And so for weather prediction modeling, we have a near real-time forecasting as well as historical reanalysis products. So GEOS Forward Processing, or FP, is our state-of-the-science weather prediction system. It's updated roughly every 6 to 12 months to accommodate either new observing systems and new satellite information maybe, or upgrades to our understanding in the model physics. A reanalysis such as MERA-2 will take the version of GEOS FP and reanalyze past observations in order to provide a consistent product without changes in the underlying model. And so in GEOS FP and MERA-2, we have simple chemistry for aerosols. Hopefully this video is playing for you well. This is showing our high resolution GEOS nature run. So satellites can provide information on fire location and emissions, as you saw in those red dots, like over South America. And then the aerosols are particles in the atmosphere which are emitted or produced both by natural sources and anthropogenic means, are transported. And so you can see that dust in orange color coming off of Africa. You can see sea salt in blue wrapped up in those weather systems in the Arctic. And then we can also see organic and black carbon and green from biomass burning regions like in Africa and South and in Asia, as well as sulfates in white over Asia. So in order to expand on the current capabilities of GEOS to provide full atmospheric composition forecasts, we run a version of GEOS weather forecasting model now coupled to the very sophisticated full chemistry GEOS Chem module. It has over 250 chemical species and over 725 reactions, so it's very computationally expensive. We started this project back in 2017. And since September of 2019, GeoCF has been one of GMAO's official near real-time products. And on this slide, I have two snapshots from animations, which I'd love to show you, but they're quite long. And so I encourage you to go to the links there on the slides. And these show how complex ozone chemistry is and why we need a sophisticated model like GeoChem in order to get the diurnal cycle of surface ozone as seen in the top right-hand side here. And you can see where there's high concentrations in white during the day, close to urban centers and near forest fires, while at night, such as here in China, the ozone is low because of NOx titration. So we're able to capture this in the model. The animation on the bottom left-hand side here marches through 96 different chemical species that play a part directly or indirectly in simulating ozone chemistry. So you can see the interactions with some of these large-scale weather systems. You can see impacts of ship tracks over the oceans, fires, as well as some of the anthropogenic emissions here locally in cities. So each afternoon here in Washington, D.C., we start the GeoCF model. First, we rerun the past 24 hours now with GEOS coupled to GeoChem in order to have the best initial conditions for our 5-day forecast. You'll hear me refer to that 1-day simulation as our replay segment. And we run this model at one of the highest spatial resolutions of a global composition forecast system at 1/4 degree everywhere, which is roughly 25 kilometers or 16-mile grid boxes. And we run it on the full GEOS atmosphere. So 72 layers going from the surface all the way up to 80 kilometers. And this is run on NASA's supercomputer here out at NASA Goddard. It uses the equivalent compute power of 3,500 personal computers. So you can only imagine how much computational resources you need to run a system like this, and it still takes on the order of 8 to 9 hours to do that 1-day replay and a 5-day forecast. One of the things that's kind of unique to our product is we output information frequently. We have some surface fields every 15 minutes from the model, and most of our output, both 2D and 3D, are hourly. And we make this output available, and it remains available to the public for several years in order to support and enhance research and other applications. Ways that research scientists can interact with it: you can get .NET-CDF files downloaded directly from our website, or you can remotely access it using OpenDAP server with programming languages like Python. But for those that just want to have a quick look at the model, we do have our Fluid website, which is mobile friendly. And you can look at surface maps of major pollutants such as NO2, as I'm showing here. And we've worked with different end users to make sure that there are additional regional plots in places like Africa and in the Americas. So you can zoom in and use the animate to make animations of the forecast for your surface pollutants. We also produce over 200 pre-populated what we call datagrams, which give the 5-day forecast of your surface pollutants with a bit of meteorology information, as well as the concentrations in the lowermost atmosphere here. And we have included even 4 cities in Ghana based on a request a few years ago following a meeting with the Ghana EPA facilitated by Dan Westervelt from Columbia University. And so we can add different locations, but also we have this new capability. Since 200 pre-populated datagrams is just a small percentage of our over 1 million grid boxes and GeoCF output. So thanks to some funding that we received from NASA as well as the US Army Public Health, we have this map tool where you can click on any grid box, such here I'm showing Mombasa because I didn't find it in our list of cities, and you can actually get the forecast data or the historical data for that grid box, and it provides you with this datagram for NO2, ozone, and PM 2.5. And you can download the data as well as having that image. But it's important to note that GEOS products are not designed to be operational products. They're research products, and they support many different NASA activities, as I'm highlighting here, which measure throughout the full atmosphere. And so GeoCF is not optimized for capturing surface air quality. And you can see this by looking at our forecast scale, which has very little variation in the skill scores out to 5 days. You can see here the normalized mean bias, Pearson correlation. The -1 is that replay, and out to 5 days, these skill scores are generally pretty stable. And that's because our model doesn't directly assimilate trace gas observations or make any adjustments in near real time to the emissions. So any difference between that replay and the forecast is really due to things like meteorology and deposition and any other online parameterizations we use in the model. And so a way for us to deal with issues related to model biases from subgrid scale errors, uncertainties related to the meteorology and the forecasts, is to train a machine learning algorithm to bias correct forecasts to individual observation locations in a post-processing step. And so Christoph Keller, who unfortunately was unable to be here today, has developed such a technique using GeoCF. And I'm going to give an example for a couple of sites here in Leon, Mexico. It's about 250 miles northwest of Mexico City, up in the mountains. And you can see here that we have 2 locations within one GeoCF grid box. And so we don't expect there to be a perfect match between what I'm showing here. In pink is the ozone from the model, and in black from the 2 different observation sites here over Leon, because of the subgrid scale errors. And so what Christoph has done is that he's created this bias correction method. It uses an XGBoost decision tree algorithm to correct the original hourly average model predictions of ozone, NO2, and PM 2.5 as predicted by the model. And it uses over 50 input variables, including meteorology and chemistry, and then things about day of week, hour of the day, month of year, things like that. For emissions, we don't forecast our emissions, so that information is not used here. But the result using this machine learning algorithm is to create a local concentration adjustment. And that would be the difference between the observations and the model. And since model biases are specific to the individual location, especially the representation error, we have a separate machine learning model that's trained for each individual site. And so we can see this here now. I'm showing the model plus that bias correction factor in green. And now you can see the difference between the observations and the model can really capture that diurnal variability of ozone at the subgrid scale. And so Christoph has done this for thousands of observation sites. And now you can see here the comparison in the diamonds were the previous model forecast comparisons and the new bias corrected. And you can see now that there's a vast improvement in the original forecast skill. And so the City of Q project started a few years ago following a collaboration with GMAO and WRI, which originally brought daily averages of GeoCF forecasts as visual maps onto Resource Watch platform. And so working with Resource scientists at NASA Goddard, including Christoph Keller, Brian Doug, myself, others, CityAQ provided the bias-corrected forecasts for a first cohort of cities in Central and South America onto Resource Watch, so they're more easily accessible and easily visualized for air quality managers. I'm highlighting here on the slide ozone and PM2.5, but there's also NO2, and you can see how you can click through the different forecasts here on the right-hand side. And so you can see that Leon was actually one of these early cities here, and those same 3 sites that I showed in my example, it's using that same algorithm to bias correct the GeoCF forecast as we showed, and now you can actually get that information through Resource Watch. And so following CityAQ, CanAIRy builds on the CityAQ project. So not only is it growing in the number of cities in the global south, but also it can accommodate cities which have low-cost sensor only. They don't have the regulatory grade monitors. And so this process still requires, several years worth of data in order to best train an individual model. But first, the developers here with CanAIRy perform some QA/QC on the low-cost sensor data before sending it to us at GMAO. And then Christoph's able to provide those downscale bias-corrected forecasts. And so more cities, I understand, are encouraged to make their data open and accessible and to be able to join this initiative. And furthermore, you can download the data here from the source, which I find is just fabulous. It brings you to a new map when you do click this download from the source, and you'd actually be able to click on these locations and be able to export the forecasts in more user-friendly file formats than our research products that usually come in .cdf files. So this is really, really exciting. I'm really excited also to hear about the work that WRI is developing, an air quality interface on top of this to be able to help air quality managers interpret this air quality forecast information for decision making. So, help you understand the health risks and guidelines, really that temporal variation over the course of the day. So encourage you to stay tuned to WRI's announcements for more information on that. And in the remaining time I have, I'd like to tell you about a new project. So just looking at the fact that there is so much information out there, different types of air quality information. And so we have our global models like the GeoCF. We have both polar orbiting, and there's new geostationary satellite information coming out too. We recently here launched the Tempo satellite, which will provide hourly observations of air quality information over North America, including, I think, as far down as Mexico City. And so bringing together this as well as your regulatory air quality monitors and the emerging networks of low-cost sensors. And these all have their benefits, they all have their cons, but if we can figure out how to integrate the information together, we can hopefully get more out of the information. But being able to do that can be very difficult for a local air quality manager to bring all of that data, their own local monitoring network, global models like GeoCF and the satellite data into one place. And so I'm leading a new project which aims at removing or at least reducing some of these barriers and integrating multiple sources of air quality data. And so the idea is that we'd be bringing all this information together on one common platform. We're using Google Earth Engine, cloud computing platform. And we've already developed some data fusion algorithms in-house here at NASA GMAO. And so we're working with different users. So we have Christoph Keller, Carl Mallings, myself at NASA GMAO, as well as teaming up with Sonoma Technologies, a private company who actually help manage the implementation of our data fusion algorithm on Google Earth Engine. So we work with outside developers as well as in-house scientists. And then we have experts like Randall Martin from Washington University and Dan Westervelt, who I already mentioned at Columbia, who have extensive experience working with low-cost sensor data. And we have our partners, our UNEP, who are helping us work with users such as Dakar, Senegal, which I'm showing here in our example, bringing together this information to be able to provide higher spatial resolution forecasts based off of not only model, but data, and be able to give early warnings, and also based off of the combination of information, the uncertainty estimates that we have in our forecasts. So we're just really excited about the fact that working together with our agency partners, we can develop this new tool to be able to hand it off at the end of the project to then continue to expand to other end users. So I know that's a lot of information in 20 minutes, but I just want to say that, like GMAO, we have geosystems are central to our NASA's Earth Science mission, and expanding our capabilities to provide these downscale bias-corrected and data-constrained forecasts is a priority. And we really want to hear from you, those who have the need, so that we can help you make our products as most useful as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Knowland, for that. It's indeed intensive information to capture in such a short time. So I'm just going to hand over to Dr. Beatrice to just lead a very brief Q&A session so you can get to the gist of this session, which is the interaction and the panel discussion with the participants.
Thank you so much, Emma, for this presentation. Indeed, there's a lot of information, and fortunately, some of our participants today are aware of at least the bias-corrected option. Today, we will hear at least what are the plans for some cities to use the bias-corrected now using local sensors data, which has been a challenge as well. One of the questions that we usually have when we have been talking to the cities as potential users of the GeoCF bias-corrected forecast is when the local emissions inventory or better emissions inventory or higher resolution emissions inventory could be introduced to the forecast. Because we already know that if there is data, local data, air quality monitoring data, either reference or local sensors, eventually could be included and do this bias corrected, right? But what about emissions inventory? That would be one.
Yeah, that is a great question. And we found in the past, because we're using a global model, but running at quarter degree, sometimes the higher resolution emission data set is not best integrated into the model for the original GeoCF forecast at that quarter degree resolution, but it can be useful to include it at the time of the machine learning development. And so that information can be added. So we have had versions where we've run this with emissions and it has improved. It could also be used in something like the project that I highlighted at the end with the additional information where we could maybe take that on board as we create our data fusion of the different data sources. And so having the higher resolution emissions would definitely be very useful.
Thank you so much.
So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of the panelists that we have for our round of discussions. We have speakers from both Latin America and cities, 2 cities in Africa. So the first is Fanny Valle, who is the General Product Manager at Area Technology. And from Mexico, we have Jair Carrillo, the air quality specialist from the Secretary of Environment of Nuevo Leon, and Monica Jaimes, the Analysis and Modeling Assistant Director in Mexico City, the Secretariat of Environment, and also from Bogota, we have Edison Ortiz, the coordinator of the District Secretariat of Environment in Bogota. And from Africa, we are going to move straight ahead to Alex Ndabakira, the Directorate of Public Health and Environment from the Kampala Capital City Authority, and Selela Okoth from Nairobi. She is the Principal Senior Compliance and Environment Officer at the National Environmental Management Authority. You are so much welcome to this discussion. The floor is yours, Dr. Beatrice.
First, why we have this panel? When we were inviting our panelists to participate in this discussion, we have some questions in mind. We know from, as you can see, that we have the expertise of the air quality practitioners from cities as well as from the national government with Selela. And we have also Fanny, who has been working also with many cities in developing and applying air quality forecasts. So what we had some questions for the panelists. And in general, I will just mention what we want to know is just a recap, because we know that it was very fast what we presented, but we can follow up and you can know exactly what we would like to hear, what models each of our city practitioners are using, as well as what are the challenges that they have encountered from the user's perspective, as well as from the developer. And for those cities in some areas of our globe that have not used yet air quality forecasts, we would like to know what are their needs, what are the challenges that they envision, that they foresee once we have these tools. As Emma mentioned, we have the CTAQ, what we called before, and that we were inviting some cities to share the data from reference monitoring stations, and then to be incorporated and do the bias adjusted, so they will have access to the air quality forecast. We have two very good examples how they have been used. We also have the examples of Bogota and Mexico City, who have developed their own air quality forecast. And in the case of Bogota, how they have incorporated also the bias adjusted GOCF into their ensemble, and Mexico City running their own models, and what are the needs and what are the challenges of that. So I will start with Fanny. Could you tell us what is the experience of ARIA on developing and working with cities? What models you have used, and if you can just tell us a couple of examples of these experiences.
Yes, thank you very much, Beatrice, for inviting me and for your questions. So I'm going to share our experience at ARIA Technology. So it will give you a few examples of what we do and what is done in the world of air quality modeling, but I won't say that we do everything. So this is just examples through our experience. So I must say that I think that we started working with cities maybe about 20 years ago, when we started deploying air quality forecast systems based on models. And it started with our experience in Latin America and Africa. It was more very simple models, mainly in Africa. We started with kind of models based on even Excel sheets, giving a cost-benefit impact. So this was very simple. And why does it have to start simple? It's because the access to local input data is difficult. If you want to set up an air quality modeling system, and if you want to even to run it with photochemistry, you need to have a detailed emission inventory. So once again, we go back to the question of emissions. But through the years, I will continue with the experience in Africa. So we had projects where we used photochemical models, and the most recent experience was for the World Bank. So in fact, we also had the budget provided by the World Bank dedicated to Lagos City in Nigeria. And it was the first time that we built a quite complete emission inventory for Lagos, including all type of emission sources, and that we made air quality with photochemistry system to make an evaluation of the emission inventory. So I would say that the main challenge first is access to local input data, building robust emission inventories. Second, it's linked, of course, it's the question of budget. So of course, we need a budget dedicated to make this type of study. And we need resources. We need people to be trained on our models to understand it and to make it alive. So let me know if I have a few minutes so I can share my experience in Latin America.
Yes, and maybe, Fanny, knowing that you have been collaborating in one of the cities that is also part of our community of practice and our CTAQ project, Guadalajara metropolitan area. Could you tell us briefly what is your experience, and we can just move to the other cities as well?
Yes, perfect. Guadalajara, because this is the most recent cities we worked on. So this project was financed by the French Ministry of Economy. So in this case, we had the budget to develop quite complex system. The idea is to make a kind of demonstration of our expertise. So we set up photochemical models, starting covering the whole Mexico country, and then making a zooms. So we started with Eulerian photochemical models, and then zooming at the street scale. And at the street scale, we ran Lagrangian model. So we are at a resolution of about 5 meters. So you can see the buildings, you can see the flow around each building and going through the streets. So this is the highest resolution that we can do. But if you want to run models at this resolution, of course, you need a very detailed emission inventory. And we spent also an important part of the project dedicated to building this emission inventory. So of course, there was already existing information in Guadalajara, but we used it and we refined it. But the job is not finished, not at all. If we want to have better results, more reliable results, you need to make traffic counting campaigns. And this is what was missing at this stage. So this is our last experience. And the main challenge in this type of project is to make this system alive in time, not to have a one-shot project and then it's over. The idea is to make it, to maintain it. And for this, once again, you need to have a budget. You need to train people, so you need to allocate human resources and also budget resources.
Thank you so much, Fanny. And then moving to that, with two cities that have a similar experience of running highly sophisticated models, as is the case of Mexico City and Bogota. I would like to ask Monica. Monica, could you please tell us what is the experience in Mexico City? What model do you use? Briefly, how have you come into how do you develop? And what are the main challenges and uses for your model in Mexico City?
Thank you for inviting me. So we have a air quality forecast system, which was developed in collaboration with the Supercomputing Center at Barcelona. This project was started in 2017. Since then, we have been using the model. We have data since 2017. And what we use at the model is 4 meteorological domain and 2 photochemical and emissions domains. The model that we use for meteorology is a WRF model. And we use an emissions model called Hermes, developed in Barcelona, developed specifically for Mexico City. And we use the CEMAC. This is a model by the University of North Carolina, which is part of the EPA in the US. It's all free and which is very convenient. And well, we use the model to notify the population about the state of the air quality today and tomorrow. so that they can make decisions and they can protect their health. And with the model, we also use an index for susceptible people or people at risk, a model which was developed in collaboration with the University of New York with Dr. Kevin Cromark. And this index is more related to the Canada index with multi-pollutants. And we use a model to provide this information and data for Mexico City, but it's just one datum. This is how the index was developed. We use it in the index, we use it to notify the population about the air quality, as I mentioned, and the communication happens through our website and through an application called AIRE or AIR, where we have the monitoring data and where we have the forecast. And in the website, you can also see the results of the risk index for susceptible people. One of the biggest challenges that we face is computing power. Because when we developed this project, we had a cluster with 72 cores. However, the budget that is necessary for renovating or upgrading the computing equipment is quite significant. And right now, with the economic situation, well, we really haven't been able to update the equipment. So, one of the biggest challenges is computing power. And in terms of the staff, we have an IT area which administers a cluster. We have a monitoring area. We have an analysis area, which is in charge of modeling. And another fairly big challenge that we face is that a lot of authorities do not believe in our model. They wanted to forecast like outlier data, like environmental emergencies, which happens basically weekly or monthly. It happens very frequently. So it's very hard for a model to be able to forecast these kind of outlier values, outstanding values. So we have implemented certain methods for adjusting bias. However, we have to keep working at it because we are very interested in participating with NASA so that we can improve on our biases. So it's true that we have applied certain methods like the Kalman filter and other statistical methods, but we do require more adjustments, especially for large data. The model in general has an 80% efficacy throughout the whole year, but for higher data or larger data, there's a lot that goes wrong. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we have right now. And also the changing administrations, which change every year, right? So we do not know if we're going to be able to keep working for the next administration, right? Even though we're technical staff with over 20 years of experience, it's uncertain whether we're going to continue our work with the next administration. And this puts at risk the operation of the entire forecasting system. So these are real challenges that we are facing right now as a city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. I guess thank you for giving us this overview and also remarking the challenges. I think that we have also been talking how to collaborate and have even options for you to incorporate in your, as an ensemble of your model, other outputs like the one of the GOCF. So hopefully we will have that soon. And I will go now to Bogota, Edison. You also have developed your own air quality modeling system that is now has an ensemble. If you can tell us also what is a brief description, how do you use it, for what uses is the air quality forecast for Bogota? And if you can also tell us what are the main challenges that you are facing.
So we can divide the models into 4 different uses. We have local models, which are configured in a high resolution for the city. We use these mainly for forecasting and for evaluating some pollutant measures. And we also measure some changes in the emissions that could be helpful for decision makers in the city so that they can make better and more precise decisions in how they prioritize mitigation measures in the city for improving air quality. Within these local models, we do use the WRF meteorological model. As a photochemical model, we use the CMAC model. And right now, we're going to start implementing the WRF Chem module. This is one of the projects that we have for this year. So in order to have this capacity for photochemical modeling, the government of Bogota has developed an emissions model that allows for a lot of details in measuring the emissions, including chemistry. And this model is so detailed that it can determine emissions even at the street level, which is important because another one of the models that we have are for microenvironments. So we are finalizing the testing stage of two models. One is a Gaussian model, and another is a CFE model that will allow us to have forecasts at the street level with a resolution of 5 or 10 meters in strategic locations around the city. So these are the second models that we have. Now, the third group that we have are global models. We started working with WRE a couple of years ago in terms of correcting the bias for the GOCF model. We use data for corrections. However, one of the things that we discussed in one of the technical meetings that we had was that the models, specifically speaking about Bogota, were trained before the pandemic. Then COVID-19 changed the dynamics of the city, especially in terms of emissions. So this makes it so that the model as such, the adjustments to the GOCF model that we worked with, it's not performing as well as it was before in 2019. So probably we can talk about the need of retraining the GOCF model with the post-pandemic conditions. In any case, these models, on top of the GOCF, we also use the results generated by the Copernicus modeling system, the CAMS, in the European Union. It has some important products in terms of air quality modeling, photochemical modeling, and we believe that these models are really important for us. These models have the capacity of reproducing forest fires that happen in the country in certain times of the year. These forest fires cause some environmental emergencies here in the city. And throughout the year, we've had two critical conditions that have led us to declare emergencies in the city. So that is the main use that they have right now. And right now we're working to use this whole global information and feed it as input into the local models that we have so that we refine our forecasts.
And the fourth group of models that we use are models that we understood can be difficult to interpret for decision makers. So when there are retro replaying models, message becomes simpler. If you say that we're now having an impact of forest fires that are happening very far from the cities, even though these models are difficult to understand, they are also easier to transmit to the general population. We use high split and still, but we only use these models when we have a need to communicate to the general population something that is happening. So those are the main models that we are using. We also have validation methods that allow us to assess the performance of all the models that we're using, local and global models. And this is also a project that we've been working on this year. We hope to integrate all the data coming from the models to try to have the data in one place and have the probabilities. We have official communication channels to communicate our forecast through a web application and through a mobile app as well, where we can share the results of forecasts and the air quality measurements. We are currently developing a more sophisticated platform because this is focused more on sharing information to the general population, and they only see what's strictly necessary. But we are developing a platform that can bring together all the products that we use to generate forecasts, both air quality and meteorological forecasts, to share with the scientific community and also with people who are more familiarized with these topics. You can look at the website of the ministry to find them. Specific challenges, I think I've already been mentioning them as I addressed each of the models individually. We're always looking to improve the assessment of the parameters of the models to guarantee that the models will have a good performance. As was said in the case of Mexico City, we have a lot of trust in the models when it comes to district management because the conditions that led to air quality warnings, for instance, have given us a lot of trust in the model, and decision makers have also trusted the models. And so now we feel more confident when issuing a public warning. According to the Colombian legislation, we have to wait for 48 hours before issuing a warning regarding air quality. But thanks to the positive impact that forecasts have had, we have been able to issue those warnings even before the end of those 48 hours. So in Bogota, we have received a lot of support. Our infrastructure is limited, but we try to use it as best we can. We have a powerful server, so to speak, with similar characteristics to what was described in the case of Mexico. And there are other satellite servers that also help us to use other models that don't require such high computational power. We are also currently working to try to use models that are not photochemical, that are not very robust, but that can have a good performance because they can substitute the need for forecasts if the servers are in maintenance, if they're out of order, to make sure that we don't lose the possibility of communicating with the general population. There are currently 4 people in the micromodeling group. We have specific tasks. We do meteorological modeling. In my case, I am the head of the group, but I am also in charge of air quality forecasts, both locally and regionally. there's someone in charge of emissions inventory and microenvironments. So that's what we have in Bogota. We've been making progress in many important ways. And of course, we would like to publish scientific papers more often, but I'm sure we will soon be able to do so.
Thank you so much, Edison. Actually, that's a lot. So yeah, it's good that you are still considering as well as publishing, which is like the extra time that you need. Thank you so much. Jair, could you please give us an overview of how is Nuevo Leon, particularly for the Monterrey metropolitan area? What models are you using and what is your experience? And if you identify some challenges?
We are currently using the model that WRI and NASA provided. And one of the challenges that we have identified and we've been trying to overcome is the seasons that are not really meeting the forecast. And that's because of the quality of the data that we had before. Starting in 2021, we had much better data, and that may have an impact on our seasonal analysis in the future, but we don't have those results yet. We are also using models, as Edison said, in the hopes of making interpretation better and therefore decision making. We use high split in those seasons when there are forest fires because the city is greatly affected by the meteorological circumstances. When we have cold weather, there's also an impact on concentration of pollutants, specifically PM10 and PM2.5. However, we've identified that in those seasons where we have a forecast, what is happening is very similar to the forecasts provided. And this we have used when we talk to decision makers on a state level and on a municipal level. It allows us to give better recommendations when it comes to exposure to pollutants. Something else worth mentioning is that in Monterrey, we have been managing projects with more robust models. That's our goal. We would like to extrapolate the information that we have from emissions inventories, and we are about to have the 2018 emissions inventory ready with a higher number of sources and sites in the metropolitan area. And we hope that then we will be able to use other models. We have a project to receive training from the Autonomous University of Nuevo Leon and the National Autonomous University of Mexico, because, and this is something that Monica mentioned and that I think happens in other places too, which is the lack of human power to implement these models. Right now, in the state of Nuevo Leon, I am the only person who can validate data and therefore the only person who's in charge of visualization that can then communicate the results to decision makers. So we hope in the future to have other experts join the team who can also understand modeling and forecasting better, because this will allow us to implement the models that we would want to use in the city. We have used the data mostly during this season, so from November to April, because it is the season that in the metropolitan area of Monterrey, we have more problems when issuing warnings. So forecasts have been very useful to have a good observation in under 48 hours of the conditions that we may see in the metropolitan area. We're also using the meteorological data that we receive from private sources. It allows us to look at the vertical profiles of the atmosphere to make comparisons and analyze if the behavior that the forecasts are showing is actually accurate. I think in every city that has described their situation before me, there are many similarities. For instance, there's again a lack of human power, and in order to make progress, we need more technical capacity in order to make better use of the tools and, of course, have better forecasts that are more accurate. Something else that I've observed is that as forecasts can help to predict the conditions of the city better, they become more valuable for decision makers and they understand their importance. But sometimes it is very difficult to explain to them that these are forecasts, that they will not always be 100% accuracy, that there's always a certain level of uncertainty as we do the interpretation of data. So something else, last thing I will mention, is that the data that we currently have, we hope to continue to expand on it, to have more tools that will allow us to have a better understanding of other seasons in the city, because we have more monitoring stations now in the city. And this is a challenge because we will not be able to cover a larger geographical area. And this is what we want to provide for the population. So we need more technical training, we need more budget, and of course, I want to highlight the importance of forecasts in decision making.
Thank you so much, Jair. And I guess, yes, I agree that's part of what we have been finding with this South-to-South conversation, is that there are many similarities, and this knowing these challenges, we think that for those cities who are about to use these forecasts, these tools, they at least will know what are the challenges, and eventually we will try to find some ways of solving some of these problems. And I would just like to highlight that what also Edison and Jair mentioned is that when we did the bias-corrected GeoCF, we used data that was available in that time. And now that even Edison is mentioning that the city has changed the dynamics, we may need to retrain the models. And that's something that we have been talking with Christoph, which is the case for all the cities that were originally in the CTAQ. And I will go now with Alex and then with Sebela. Could you please tell us what is your perspective of what will be the use of a forecast in Kigali, Alex? And what do you see, I mean, listening to the challenges that other cities are encountering, even after a few years of running these models, do you see that these will be challenges also for cities like Kigali? And some of your thoughts? Knowing that the bias-corrected air quality forecast from CanAIRy Alert for Kigali is actually ready. We just need to go and do more analysis of how this is, how this bias-corrected is reflecting the reality, and what is the performance, and again, I mean, sorry, Kampala.
Thank you. I was actually getting confused. I thought there was another Alex. Good evening, Kim. Good evening here in Uganda, and thank you for the questions. Generally, I think the challenges will not be different. They are likely to be the same. Maybe the magnitude is what is likely to be different, because looking at the capacity gaps that we have and the nature of how we do activities at KCCA, where you have one person multitasking, working on air quality, but also working on other environmental related things. The skill set is a bit diverse, and you realize that interpretation of models, development of models, and making sense out of them is a super skill. So you can't just do this, and then you can also do several other things. It's very difficult. It has to be, a data person. It needs like teamwork. The person who manages the data and who gets the model out, and then those who interpret and those who communicate. Our setting is a bit, different and slightly broader than what is likely to be in other places. I anticipate the challenges will be the same, but are likely to be bigger in magnitude. In terms of how forecasting is a tool that the Kampala City needed yesterday. You as you communicate, as you do your work, you need to do it in such a way that the public believes in you. Because at the end of the day, if air pollution does not make sense to the ordinary citizen, if they feel that it's not a problem to them, that they have other bigger problems, then all our works will go to the waste, because you want them to trust what you're saying. And people tend to trust you better if you can tell them what is going to happen tomorrow with a very close certainty. So if you say that tomorrow's air is likely to be like this, and tomorrow comes and it's actually like that, they will trust your tools, they will trust your system, they will trust what you say. And if you now add that, look here, air pollution causes lung issues, that message will sink easily. And you are likely to cause behavior change more easily if you can link this to individual health. Because our belief is that, of course, every other good thing is added to the right person. So you need to first be alive and with a very good quality life for you to be able to have additional things. So forecasting, just leave around it, informing us based on the period. Of course, you're forecasting for 5 days, for 10 days, for 20 days, or for even a longer period. The evidence-based journey, evidence-guided journey that we are taking to manage air pollution for this city requires historical data that you already have. It requires present data, real time. It requires data in the future with very good precision. That will guide you even as you set objectives, for instance, in your action plan or in several other documents. If I know that if I continue with business as usual, the air pollution is going to be like this in the next 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Or if I do business unusual, it is going to behave like this. That gives you ideas in terms of deploying tools, deploying resources, maximizing the dollar so that you have very good outputs. It also helps you, of course, you forecast the pollution trends, yes. But then you can also be able to forecast the economic losses. Our politicians in the resource-limited setting understand challenges in terms of financial implications. Any policy you want to bring up, the first question from the policymaker, from the politician is, what is the financial implication of what you're saying you want to do? Can this government manage it without disorganizing the current status of funding? Resources are not enough. How do we achieve that? So you need to forecast that. You need to forecast and model the health effects that the pollution is likely to behave like this in the next 2, 3, 4 days. And this is what is likely to happen in hospitals in terms of respiratory conditions, many patients presenting in wards, children missing school, so that you link what you are forecasting to the other effects of the pollution that the policymakers, the politicians, the non-scientists will actually understand. That will also help you to edge out your case in terms of the gains. That if I do a campaign today to prevent people from exercising on road XYZ on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, these are likely to be the gains. If it's an examination period, then you will say most children will be able to do their exams because they will not be affected. So I think I look at forecasting in that angle, and that's how we would expect to use it. At the moment, we do not have active. We are not actively using forecasting tools. We are trying to work with the Makerere University here, it's a national university, to do at least short-term forecasts, which we want to incorporate in the awareness campaigns that we are building. Already, we have some strong points. We have weather news by the Meteorological Authority running, but this does not include air pollution. So if you have air pollution forecasts, the moment the national, media houses are broadcasting weather news, then it's very easy to incorporate, air pollution forecasts and related information at no additional cost, because this is of interest.
Alex, but in this particular case, I mean, the air quality forecast for Kampala, bias corrected, is almost ready, right, Christine? So, I mean, the challenge is, and as you were mentioning, I mean, I guess always the challenge is how we make a synergy between two communities, the health community and the atmospheric community, right? Because we will have an air quality forecast, but it has to be interpreted, as you mentioned, and what are the impacts in health. And that's something that Mexico City and also Bogota have been doing. And even Monterrey, right? Telling, well, tomorrow is going to be bad, and we know that it has some health impacts. With the susceptibility index, risk index of Mexico City, it targets on specific people, actually people who are in susceptible conditions, and they will know that tomorrow they will have a bad day. So do you think that that could be possible in the near term? I mean, we will have the air quality forecast for Kampala. This available, of course, has to be evaluated, but how can we make that link?
That's a very easy link, because for us, actually, that's the main interest for the city. For all the awareness raising campaigns, we link the problem to health. It becomes very easy as a selling point. At the KCCA itself, the Public Health and Environment Directorate has both epidemiologists. It has very experienced health experts. We have over 15 doctors employed by the city authority. We have public health professionals. We have environmentalists. So the link at city level is very easy. And the Ministry of Health of Uganda also has an environmental, whole department with the commission. It's like a main department of the Ministry of Health, linking environmental issues to the health of Ugandans, including also sanitation and also other public health emergencies related to environment, like flooding. So it's doing the link is so easy, and the people are actually there. In fact, we have more capacity in health than in air pollution. So in terms of linking these two, once the forecast is there, that should be easier.
Great. Well, so looking forward for your experience, Alex, and using this forecast and linking, as you mentioned, that will be easier for your case. Now we'll go with Selela. Selela, I mean, we know that you have to take care of many cities in Kenya, not only Nairobi, but knowing that Nairobi will have an air quality forecast soon. And of course, again, among other tools that has to be tested and communicated, and all the challenges that we have heard. What do you see the opportunities, the use of this forecast particularly for Nairobi, and how do you see that could be scaled to another cities in Kenya? And if you can also comment about the challenges you see as well for this type of tools.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Indeed, we see an opportunity here as a country, apart from just looking at it from the context within Nairobi. And as you've correctly put it, NEMA has a national scope. So basically, as you work around the city of Nairobi, you are also giving a wider perspective into seeing how we can address the issues of air pollution within other cities in Kenya. So one other thing that, apart from what Alex has said regarding being able to inform the public of what is happening, communicate to the politicians. And I think I wanted just to add a voice to this, that just the week before last week, we had a meeting with WRI and Vital Strategies, and what we were learning were quite interesting statistics regarding health-related complications that are largely associated to air pollution. And they were not very good figures that we want to talk about, but I mean, we saw this as a very great opportunity to change the policy action that the government has had over the years. So when we do this forecasting, and you can tell people that for this period, we've had these cases, and look at the data that we are getting from the forecasting that we've been able to do within this period, this really resonates well with what we are getting. So there is a clear indication that our people are getting harmed because of pollution from various sources. Apart from that, I would want to also see that I see this an opportunity to ease planning within the city of Nairobi. And I think it gives us an opportunity to advise the public, where should you be in this particular time? Where should you be in this particular day? To avoid scenarios of exposure to our public. And I think that is our mandate. As government, we have a mandate to protect the public health. And I think one key thing is that we cannot continue keeping quiet. And data from hospitals are showing already that people are getting harmed because of air pollution. So it would be good to have this, because we can now give high alerts to people and tell them avoid this particular location on this particular day, avoid outdoor activities, for instance, because within the next 48 hours, this is what the weather will be, the air quality will be like. Other thing is that I think we are in an era that we have a lot of issues to do with climate challenges, and I think we cannot just avoid this. I think this is an opportunity to do risk assessment also when it comes to issues of air quality and climate due to our probably the existing poor quality or rather low quality standards of air that we have as a nation. So I think this will also be an information opportunity beyond people that we want to talk about as the public, but largely influence policy action. And last, I want to say that with this, having this particular kind of forecasting, then we can also have some effective pollution control measures. Unlike we are operating in a situation that we don't know what's happening. Yes, we are working and saying we are regulating air quality in the country, but where is that information to show us that we are making a difference today? What can show us that today we need to respond this way, unlike we responded the other day? So I think getting this information in advance is a very important opportunity to enhance the government's role in air quality management. So coming to cities, Nairobi is the most affected, of course, just by virtue that it's a majority of Kenyans live in the city of Nairobi. And number two, it only means that it's also in terms of industrial growth and vehicle population, it's leading in Kenya. So that can only mean that it's the most affected. And of course, that also means that our people are more at risk in Nairobi than probably other cities. But that does not mean that the other cities are not at risk. And probably I look at a scenario that in the future, if we have to get this forecasting done in Nairobi, then we can start bringing on board that are also already at particular risks and bring them on board to appreciate what is happening and probably work towards reducing pollution with these particular cities. Finally, when it comes to challenges, not so different from what Alexa said, I think being in East Africa, we seem to share, we have a common share of these problems. And just as he said, the issues of technical capacity to model, to analyze, to interpret, and what do you communicate? Because the other thing that I think, one thing I've learned being in this particular space is that the air quality scientist or the engineer really understands what the challenge is. But how do you tell the ordinary citizen that according to them, air pollution is the smell, that there is pollution of air? So what do you want to say? How do you want to package the information so that it sells? In terms of linking this, in terms of once we interpret it, I think for the police action, if you package it well, it will be understood. And I was very impressed to hear from, I think, Edison, who said that they have a model that is easy to interpret for decision makers. That was quite interesting to hear. And I'm asking myself, how then do we have this easy to also make policy makers, make it easy for the public to understand what we want to communicate? So those are interesting areas that I think we need to really appreciate. The other thing in terms of challenges, I think there is a very key concern when it comes to data storage. From what I've heard from the other presenters, they have very good servers that is able to store data over time. And actually, I think that is quite interesting. So those are things that we as a government should be ready that even if we have this support, how do we look at the sustainability aspect? That we are able to maintain this particular information for the duration that it actually should be used. So for now, let's stop there and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Selela. And I will let now to Christine.
All right, thank you so much, Selela and Alex, and every other speaker that has spoken. One highlight that I have gotten from it is that city managers or people within policy, they have a mandate to keep the citizens safe. And it is our duty as scientists to provide the data and the information that does just that. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we look forward to seeing you in a different communication channels to continue creating this community. So I'll start from the east to the west. Have a good night and have a great day.